Outreach Coordinator for the South Asia National Resource Center at the Jackson School of International Studies here at the University of Washington. Welcome to this evening's final session of this year's Global Focus Series, sponsored by all of the outreach centers at the Jackson School of International Studies. We have a wonderful speaker this evening who I'll say a couple of words about in a minute. A couple of logistical things. We have coffee and tea in the back of the room. Please help yourselves, make yourself comfortable. There is a restroom across the hallway, and we also will be taping this evening's presentation. We will have that available online within a few days, so once you have seen it and you are incredibly impressed with the presentation, please tell your friends that they also will be able to see it online. There's also a couple of pieces of literature at the back of the room that I'd like to draw your attention to. One is the brochure about the South Asia National Resource Center, where you can get information about our other programs, our academic degrees, our wonderful faculty, and our great students, several of whom are here this evening. And there's also a brochure about a project which we just started this year, which is going to continue, called Development and Diaspora in South Asia. And it's about a project looking at local development organizations with projects in South Asia. Since our speaker this evening somewhat falls into that category, I want to make sure that you all know about what the work that we're doing related to that. So I'll introduce Todd Shea now. Usually this is the point where I would have looked at someone's curriculum vitae, and I would tell you about all the books that they published and all the research articles they published and all the academic presentations they've made and all the other wonderful work that the usual person who presents at these types of events does. But Todd is a different kind of person in that regard. And most of what would be really fun for me to tell you about is actually going to be told by himself in his own words, which will be much more interesting. So I'll give you the short version, which is that a lot of people say that September 11th, 2001 changed everything. And Todd's career trajectory is definitely an illustration of that, at least for himself, and I think probably for the lives of most of the people he's come into contact with since that date. He went from being a musician to being one of the world's leading humanitarians in what sounds like a matter of hours. And through that work that he started on that day and various other activities, he has come to a place where he is making a real difference, a real sustainable, long-term difference in the lives of people in a part of the world that is extremely important to all of us as Americans, certainly, and to the rest of the world. And he has some really important things to say about what led him to that position and what it would take to expand this work and to continue it. So I now want to turn the floor over to Todd, and he's going to talk about building bridges of understanding between Pakistan and America. And I know there was a lot more to that title, which I don't remember, but I'm sure it will come out in his presentation. So please join me in welcoming Todd Shea.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Keith, and I want to thank the University of Washington for having me here as a guest. It's been a wonderful experience this past few days. There's only one thing I would take issue with what you said. Calling me one of the world's leading humanitarians is just something I have a tough time processing because I know it's not really true. I've met too many wonderful humanitarians in my work, people that have done things for years and years and years beyond what I've done, and in many more places that I've done it. And I've met too many wonderful people that aren't recognized at all. They just do it, and they didn't have the New York Times stumble upon them to do a big story like they did about me being in Pakistan. So yes, I've gotten some attention, but it's hard for me to accept that because, like I said, there's so many people that I've met and run across that inspire me and have done so much more than I've done. Some people in the face of serious danger on a daily basis to their lives. So I hope that one day I can fill their shoes to some degree, to even some small degree, then I would be happy with what I've been able to do. I think my message really has a lot to do with that, the fact that one person who's motivated can make a difference in times of disaster or anything to make the world a better place. I came from a situation where I was addicted to cocaine and smoking crack and things like that when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, and had lost my mom when I was 12, and started hanging out with a bad crowd and went downhill from there. I was able to get out of that and started playing music for a living, and was luckily able to get out of drugs and that life. And so I pursued my music career, but I also would speak with troubled teens and go to places where teenagers were either had like some kind of teen center or even detention centers, and talk to kids and play music for them and just tell them how I got out of that life. And that's probably, that's what I thought I would be doing with my life, is doing music and pursuing that, both commercially and philanthropy as it pertains to helping kids in trouble. But obviously, life throws people curves. It throws us all curves that we have to respond to. And eventually, thank goodness, got my life together, and at least enough to, I don't even know if my life is together now, but it's certainly enough to where I'm able to help a few other people. This is the logo for my Pakistan registered entity, CDRS, Comprehensive Disaster Response Services. We've actually just changed the name this year, and we've registered in the States as Shine Humanity, because we're doing more than disaster relief. My organization and our board and I, we are involved in sustainable healthcare initiatives. So Shine Humanity stands for Sustainable Healthcare Initiatives Now Empowering Pakistan. So when 9/11 happened, I had a recording and management deal with a company run by a man named Sid Bernstein. Sid brought the Beatles and the Stones and Jethro Tull and some other British artists to America and managed them, and booked the Beatles at Shea and some other, Shea Stadium and some of the other world famous events that have taken place at that period of time. Still has, even today, a very big name amongst music business professionals and people. And he and his team had me playing at a place called CBGB's nightclub, a famous nightclub that a lot of rock bands and punk bands got started at in Lower Manhattan. That was scheduled for September 12th, 2001. I was on the cover of a national music magazine with Melissa Etheridge and some other artists that you may have heard of, a band called Tool, a hard rock band. And anyway, so I was on the cover, sharing a cover with some real famous bands, and started thinking, well, maybe I actually will be successful. Some good things are starting to happen. 9/11 happened, and the gig obviously didn't happen. And my life changed a lot, not just in what I realized I could do by helping people in times of disaster, but it also changed me in the sense that the pursuit of a commercially successful music career, where I sold a lot of albums and all those things that I was pursuing that were kind of important to me, just lost importance after 9/11. And I think it was because I didn't realize until 9/11 that I would have been able to do anything like what I did at 9/11. I never had any training or background in disaster relief. I don't have a degree in it. I barely got out of high school, so didn't even go to college. And the reason I barely got out of high school is because, of course, I wasn't showing was hanging out doing drugs instead. So the only reason I even graduated high school is because after failing 9th grade once and then the second time, the third year of failing 9th grade, I got in trouble with the law, with drugs and fights and stuff, and I got sent to a place where for 11 months I was there, and was able to make up 3 grades in 1 year and come back and graduate on time. I wouldn't recommend anyone actually go that route, but it's what happened in my case. So when 9/11 happened, and I did all these things to help people, it was not in the sense of having any expertise in particular. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how to go into burning buildings and save people's lives. I have no business doing that kind of stuff. I don't know anything about it. But what I was able to do was get those people who are trained in that type of thing, the things that they needed so that they didn't have to concentrate on getting those things, whether it be medication or supplies or even clean socks or food or whatever item they may have needed, Visine and eye wash for their contact lenses, supplies that somebody needed to bring them, and if they didn't have it brought to them, then they would have problems doing what they're trained to do, or they would have to go out and get it themselves, which would waste time. So I realized that I had this role that I played, especially in the first 3 days after 9/11 occurred. The larger efforts were taking time to take shape, as any large effort would. It's just the nature of how things are when you're cranking up a big effort with lots of people and vehicles and situations occur where it takes time to put all that and deploy it. So I was able, with my little van, with my musical equipment that I unloaded, I was able to find a way to get things to people right away in smaller amounts, but very quickly. And I didn't just go traipsing down to Ground Zero on my own. I went to Chelsea Piers Disaster Center, I think a little bit north of Canal Street on the west side of Manhattan. And I just simply went in and asked the people there if they needed anybody that had a van. I was willing to go anywhere in the city, not just to Ground Zero, but ended up, was asked to bring some fruit and water and Gatorade to a fire battalion down at Ground Zero. I did that and saw a lot of things that were needed. So I called a friend of mine that had a substance abuse clinic. He worked with the FDNY whenever one of their members had a drug problem or alcohol problem. And so from that, we were able to get permission to keep going back and forth and bringing stuff. And that's how my career in disaster relief started. I realized that I was good at it, I think because my life's been a disaster. And I really mean that, because when your life when you've been through disastrous times, you know, it sounds kind of funny, but you can help people in times of disaster, be compassionate and understanding of what they're going through when they've lost people that are dear to them, and then also effectively operate in a very stressful, intense, and tragic situation, and keep your nerves about you so that you can be effective for people. Because you know, obviously, when I've seen children horribly broken in a disaster, I just want to hold them and sit down and cry. You know, some of the things that I've seen, but I'm not going to be able to help them if I break down. So being able to keep your wits about you is another thing that, having been through tragedy, I suppose, to the level that I had been by losing my mom at a young age, I was able to do that. The other thing is that as a musician, I would run the band. I would drive the van to the next town, and if it broke down in the middle of Iowa in a cornfield where you're 100 miles from anywhere, I'd have to fix the flat tire or the engine getting blown up. I would have to deal with the club owners and the radio stations, trying to get them to, you know, play my record, deal with club owners about getting paid, all these things, tune the guitars, set up the equipment, take it down at the end of the night, deal with the managers and the record companies, and all the sorts of things that you have to do. You know, when you're playing music at that level, the most fun part is when you get on stage and you're actually able to just play. But there's so much around it that you have to do in order to even be semi-successful. And I think that those things also taught me something about logistics that I was able later to apply to what I do. This is a couple pictures of me as a musician in different times in my life. As I said, that's what I thought I would always be doing. And never even dreamed that where my life has taken me would be would occur. This was at 9/11. This was me, I'm the long-haired guy there, and with a fire company that's taking some rest in our little outdoor pharmacy that we had set up, and we were taking care of people and their needs at a little corner pharmacy at Church of Liberty, which was at the southeast corner of where the towers fell, very close by. By 5 days later, what I was doing wasn't needed anymore, so I just simply left because we would just be in the way at that point, and there was no reason to be there after the larger efforts had indeed taken shape. This was me working in Sri Lanka after the tsunami. Again, I decided to go when I saw the news of the tsunami and was just like everybody else, heartbroken about all of the disaster and the human suffering that was taking place as a result of that. And but again, I didn't just go down there, as an individual and show up. I would not recommend anyone do that. But I did contact a few different groups, and one accepted me into their mission to help build houses in Sri Lanka. They were an outfit that normally taught English in developing nations, from China all the way down to South Asia and in the Middle East. And so I joined them to help build houses. But once I got there, I also saw some other people, met some people that worked at orphanages and things. So I also divided my time between, helping with the house building to going to various orphanages and some medical centers. And there's a lady named Alison Thompson that I met at one of the medical centers in a little village called Karelia, about 20 miles up the coast from Galle, at the southern end of Sri Lanka. And I saw her put this thing together. She's from Australia, but she lives in New York. Alison Thompson is her name. She's in Haiti right now. We work together there. She's working with Sean Penn's organization. She's like an angel to me. I saw her set up shop, and I saw people with very little. She had very little to start with, but she just believed in what she was doing, and she kind of showed me that not only can one person make a difference, but they can actually build an organization almost from scratch. She had some resources of her own, but very little. But what would happen is she was along this main road, and people would come and visit her or stop by, and then more people would find out and know what she was doing, and they would come and add their skills or their money or their resources. And by the time I left that place and went back to the States, she had this whole village under her wing that she was helping, and they helped rebuild that village, and she's actually, her organization that she created is still working there. And if it wasn't for her, I doubt that what I did later in Pakistan by starting my own organization for long-term relief, I doubt that I could have ever even thought about doing it. So when I got back from the tsunami, I went back to New York and was thinking about what I would do with my music again. And then Hurricane Katrina happened. I was asked by a group that I had known from working down at Ground Zero in Manhattan on 9/11 about, they were looking for a logistics person to go down to New Orleans. It was a group of Coast Guard Auxiliary and Community Emergency Response Team members from Battery Park City in Lower Manhattan. And they had the permission of the governor of Louisiana to go down and work with the U.S. Army in helping them with their rescue mission. And so I was asked to help get some boats and some trucks and supplies for them. So I immediately started working on that, got a truck from the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. They donated to us. And the Zodiac Boat Company came on board with us and brought 26 Zodiac boats in my truck and their logistics team to help people in the Army set up the boats, and clean the motors and train people on how to use them. So for 2 weeks while the waters were up, I just worked logistics on this base. I would drive to FEMA in Baton Rouge, who were very helpful in getting us some of the things that we needed in terms of equipment and supplies. And then when the waters went down, we hooked up with some people at the Louisiana Department of Animal Control and started helping rescue animals. Me and a friend of mine, an ex-Marine named Jim, we basically started taking animals to the Army and the Navy there, the USS Tortuga and the 82nd Airborne, were actually bringing animals back with them, with people. So we set up a 100-kennel, kind of makeshift kennel facility, and it got filled up very quickly. So then with our truck, we started going to Lamar Dixon Animal Shelter in Gonzales, which is a little bit short of Baton Rouge, and then the LSU Agricultural Stadium had a big animal shelter. So we were taking animals there, and then we would get supplies and cages and food, and then we kept going back and forth, saving animals. We brought in 5,000 units of animal rabies vaccine and some human rabies vaccine for people that were getting bit, and for animals that, in order to leave the state legally, they needed to be vaccinated. So this is the kind of stuff we worked on. And the Louisiana Department of Animal Control started giving us actual addresses of people that left New Orleans thinking they were going to come back in just a couple days, evacuated, and they left their pet there thinking everything was going to be fine, and obviously the levees broke and the city flooded. They couldn't get back in. So, you know, after 2 weeks, obviously people were frantic and about getting their pets. So we would go in and, with the permission of the people, and actually break into houses and rescue the animal there. The cats, the dogs we found mostly live animals, a few animals that had expired, but it was amazing how resilient the animals were after living through that. The water was not drinkable. It was the worst flood muck. It smelled terrible. Think of everything under your kitchen sink, and oil and water and dead bodies and whatever else was in that water. It was pretty nasty. It was always gumming up the motors of the boats, and so it wasn't something that an animal could live on. So the animals were pretty skinny, but it was amazing how good the cats looked after 3 weeks or a month. I mean, really do have, you know, that thing about 9 lives, I think is at least from what I saw in New Orleans, is pretty true. So it was very personally gratifying to me to help animals, because I particularly love cats, but I love all animals, and so that was something that I'll never forget, being able to help so many animals and reunite them with their owners. The day that I got back from Hurricane Katrina to take the truck back to Maryland, Department of Emergency Management, I came and visit my son, who's here with me today, Tim, and he'll be 20 this year, but at that time, you know, he was just getting into high school, and I came in the door, and we sat down to a pizza, and just within 5 minutes of being in the door, I turned on the television, earthquake in Pakistan. And so, you know, I saw how bad it was, and being that I'd just been to the tsunami and Hurricane Katrina that same year, and then this was happening, it looked like something that possibly I could be helpful with. So I called the Pakistan embassy and got their number from Google, and they said that there was a team of Pakistani American doctors that were going from George Washington University Hospital. And they gave me the number of Dr. Atif Malik, who is a pain specialist in Maryland, and they were putting together this effort. And so I called them, and sure enough, they were a bunch of doctors, you know, and deploying, but they didn't have a logistics person. So being able to be there for them, to give them those things that they needed, so that they could worry about being doctors and not have to worry about being, you know, also taking care of their own needs as far as, you know, I took care of everything for them, from helicopter schedules to new volunteers coming in, briefing new volunteers, setting up tents, setting up lighting, setting up electricity, generators, fuel, arranging for more medications and supplies when things were running out, coordinating with UNICEF, the U.S. Army for the helicopters and other relief efforts that we were sharing at that landing zone, where we had this little MASH unit. They were seeing 600 patients a day, so, you know, for them to worry about their own logistical needs would have been a big problem for them, as high as the patient load and the kind of injuries they were seeing, a lot of infections and wounds that were either very, very close to being gangrenous or gangrenous already, and these type of things. So They were basically stabilizing the really seriously wounded, getting them on Chinook U.S. helicopters and other helicopters and evacuating them out because the roads were blocked and at that point you couldn't get vehicles in. This is the area that I live in Pakistan now. So within a week of leaving Hurricane Katrina, I was in this area. And this mountain in front is about 9,000 feet. This was taken in the summer. It has snow on it a lot of the winter. This village here is Chakar. That little field is a cricket field, and we were using it for helicopters. All these houses, all these dots that you see are the silver roofs of new houses that have been built since the earthquake. So a lot of the homes have been reconstructed. The snow-capped mountains along this ridge line here is this disputed border between India and Pakistan. And we we have 12 facilities that are government facilities that were heavily damaged or destroyed in the earthquake. And my organization helps respond to their needs and partnering with the government to help the people have what they need so that those health facilities are actually functioning with enough medicines and supplies to take care of people. A lot of these areas, especially that back valley there, very remote, terrible roads, very difficult areas to work in, and the people there, they're used to tough living because it's not easy, especially in the winter. A lot of the roads are blocked and access to healthcare is very difficult. It's 2 hours to Muzaffarabad city, and it's 6 hours to Islamabad, the capital, when the weather's good and when there's not a landslide. So it is quite a remote area, and we serve, in the area that we serve is about 200,000 people in our catchment area. This was during the emergency phase. You can see the U.S. Chinook. The Pakistani army was unloading the back of the Chinooks for getting the tents and food and blankets and supplies and medicines and things that we needed off of the helicopters, and then we would get the injured patients on. And this was a cycle that continued for a good month. Just literally every half hour, 20 minutes, half hour, there was a helicopter landing. One time I counted in that field 6 different helicopters that were on ground at one time. So it was a very busy air traffic control situation for whoever was handling that. This is me with a baby that just needed formula. I remember this baby very well because it was the first one that I remember seeing after like 3 weeks of seeing children horribly injured, that this baby wasn't injured at all, just needed formula. So it's kind of like a miracle baby. Everybody in the camp kind of stopped what they were doing and had to hold the baby and see the baby and take a picture with the baby because it was a beautiful baby that was just didn't have a scratch. And that's something really strange that we always see babies without a scratch, But for 3 weeks, when the only thing you've seen is every baby has come in with some kind of bad injury or something, and then you see one that isn't injured, then it becomes really, emotional and special and amazing in ways that that at least I could have never imagined. So what we've basically done is, when I got there on ground in Pakistan, there were a group of young men who were not injured in the earthquake. They were just fresh out of college, just kids. A lot of them barely escaped while the houses collapsed around them. A lot of them had family that died. Their houses were flatter than a coffee table. They obviously lost everything. But they weren't injured, so they came and worked with me as volunteers, and later I hired them. And they have been the core group of people that I still work with today. I kind of trained those young guys and formed them into a group of people that would be available to that area because their families and friends and their villages are there. And so they would be tied to that area. And also, you could pay them a good amount for the local market economy, but you wouldn't have to pay them the kind of salaries that you would have to pay to bring in people. So I started right off the bat with that kind of concept of trying to have good, honest, decent local kids and give them some work. I didn't at that time anticipate that I would still be there 5 years later, but these are the people that came forward and wanted to help us, so we took them on board. Now, the group of doctors that I came with for that first 5 months of my deployment there, they eventually eventually their mission wrapped up and they went back and that kind of ended. I saw a lot of need that was going to continue, and I thought, why not have this earthquake in this area, instead of it being an emergency phase and we help the people and then it goes back to the way it was before, which was very inadequate healthcare services, a very low budget in Kashmir and in all of Pakistan for healthcare. And so I thought, why not try to use this earthquake as a window of opportunity to change something forever, or as long as we could. So then that's where I had the idea to register, and I had people on the ground asking me to stay, the Army asking me to stay, UNICEF, even, because I tried to give my camp to UNICEF. I said, you know, now that we don't have any support from this group of doctors, they've gone back, can UNICEF take it over? And UNICEF said, no, we need people like you to stay. Why don't you stay and we'll support you? So there was this moment where I had this decision to make, well, you know, am I going to leave and just go back being happy and proud of what I had accomplished for a short period of time and go back to my music career and try to make something happen with that? And I said, wow, you know, the pursuit of music and this, you know, playing all over the country, you know, I did that for many years. And going back to that after doing this seemed to be a much more selfish pursuit, I guess you could say. And I thought that I could really be helpful in this area and do something for humanity that was a lot bigger than the self and a lot bigger than whatever music I may create or play during this time. So I decided to stay, figured out how to register and do all those things, which was a headache for me because I enjoyed working in the field, but you know, all the paperwork and stuff of setting up an organization didn't necessarily appeal to me, but you know, we got through that. And we were supported by UNICEF and an organization that does relief work out of Santa Barbara, California. They're called Direct Relief International. They do great work. They provide healthcare services and medicines, not only in disaster regions and emergency phases, but also in war-torn areas, conflict zones, and areas where generally people are poor and don't have good access to healthcare. So they gave us a couple grants. UNICEF gave us a couple grants that lasted us for a couple years. And then, you know, the earthquake was out of the headlines and other disasters were happening and other things were in the public eye and in the headlines. So, you know, I saw a lot of people leave, you know, in that first 2-year period. And then at the end of 2 years, when the money had kind of run out that was allocated for the Pakistan earthquake, as far as larger organizations being able to give us grants, I turned to the Pakistani American community, many of whom I had worked with in that 2 years. They had come as volunteers, medical students, doctors, and people that wanted to help their homeland. So they actually, there was a group of them from near Los Angeles and Orange County, California, that kind of set up a core group, and they've been financially supporting us ever since. And they're actually formed a board, and we've registered here. We have 4 years of cleared audit, and so we're very solid as an organization with our financials and the way we've spent our money. And so more and more people in the Pakistani community have supported us. Our budget is about $200,000 a year. We've spent about $630,000 US in the 4.5 years that we've worked there, and we've seen about little over 350,000 patients. So it's about $1.80 per patient contact. And the reason it's pretty low, and we haven't spent so much, is even though I'm an American citizen who has been told that maybe I shouldn't be in Pakistan, or at least I should have a security, but I haven't spent a dime on security. So right there off the budget, you can take that off, no security budget whatsoever, which some people may think is actually stupid, and maybe it is, but that's what I choose to do. I want to come into a village of people without a gunman and a gunman on my side protecting me. I don't think that that's the way that I want to approach people that I'm trying to help. I don't want there to be any barriers in between us. The other thing is, we live in the villages that we serve. We don't live down in the big city and then come up and drop a box of medicine off or do an assessment once a month. We live there. My employees are there, and we pay them well according to the market economy. So there's many things that we do that keep our budget down and have kept us afloat. We do primary and emergency health care, pediatrics. We have a minor operation theater to be able to stitch wounds when people have construction accidents or road accidents. We've saved a lot of lives because the next place where an emergency could be dealt with in Muzaffarabad they would bleed out and die before they even made it there if they had really, really bad injuries. Burn cases that we've managed, and then of course just the general primary care needs of the community. We have part of our program centers around partnering with the government. We partner with the Azad Jammu and Kashmir Health Department, AJK Health Department, and they have a very low budget. They can only provide about 25% of the medicines that the community needs. They don't have fuel budget for the ambulances or the generators or repair budget. So while that is their ambulance, we actually provide the budget to run the government ambulance and to repair it. This is our pharmacy, one of our pharmacies, which is very well stocked with mostly medicines that we purchase. So what we do, instead of creating a parallel system to the government's, we build on whatever they have. So it helps us save money, and it helps make one system that's effective, not a parallel system. If we created our own parallel system, we'd have to have everything on our own, and then it would give the government people in the area, the government doctors and people posted in that remote region, an excuse to keep sitting on their rear ends and doing nothing. So we engage the government, work with the government, and try to put some systems of accountability and control in place so that government employees that work alongside us actually do what they're supposed to do. We have medical camps in remote villages. You can see the road and the river are the same. This is one of the local Jeeps that we rent instead of buying a brand new Jeep. We rent from the locals. By renting Jeeps from the locals and buying our food in the bazaar and buying our supplies in the bazaar, we also become economically viable for the community. And so we become a part of the community. And then they'll protect me with their lives. I don't need to be protected from them. They're very loyal to us because we've been giving them health care in a very dedicated and committed way and an honest way for a long period of time. We've established that track record. This is one of my medical teams. These two young ladies are from Orlando, Florida, and they came, the rest are employees of mine. This facility right here is another way that we save money. We don't have money to build facilities. We don't have money to build a brand new building, but I can tell you that I have seen in Pakistan so many instances of a beautiful building that some donor built, but there's no system going on in there that's effective. There's some cases that the building's empty, or there's not enough medicines, or there's just not an effective use of that building, because there's nothing really particularly going on there. So what I do is, in places where the facility was destroyed by the earthquake, in this case, the village of Gundigaran, we rent a local house, and then we have our doctor and good medicines there. So obviously it would be nice to have this great building and good medicines and good doctors, but we can't really afford a great building, but we can certainly put good doctors and good medicines, and I'll take that before the wonderful, fancy, beautiful building any day of the week. And this building is actually, on the top of that hill is the line of control, so it's right at the edge there, where the disputed border between India and Pakistan rests. We have a dental health program. We brought 6 dental units into these areas, and we have volunteer dentists, government dental technicians, and medical students, dental students that come up from Islamabad that are associated with a university there to do dental health. Dental health is one of the big problems there, and we've been very successful at teaching the community that not only is dental health important to not get toothaches and things like that, but that obviously, and I didn't even know this, because again, I'm not a doctor, but I learned from dental professionals that worked with us how dangerous and life-threatening dental issues can be later in life with terrible potential cardiac cardiac and gastrointestinal and other issues that are life-threatening. So we have a very extensive dental health program. We have a mental health program that deals with some of the people who lost all their family in the earthquake and things like that. This in particular is Dr. Saloon Ahmed. He's at NYU. He's a top psychiatrist and professor there who knows the language and knows the culture and the people, so he comes and helps us out when he can. We have a school health program, which is one of our most important things. The school health program has our doctors go to schools in our catchment area and monitor the children's health care situation and does individual health screenings, and then we do lectures and education programs that are geared for the children, and then also that are geared for the ladies the mothers of these children and the teachers and staff at the school. We also invite the babies, the younger brothers and sisters of these kids who are too young to go to school to be screened. And we screen them for things like scabies, worm infestation, acute diarrhea, respiratory infections, dental problems, hygiene problems, iodine deficiency, micronutrient deficiency, and the kind of things that have historically affected a large number of the children in these areas. And they're things that are fairly easy to deal with, but if the government doesn't have a good healthcare system, these things can lead to much worse maladies for the children and poor health care, especially things like iodine deficiency, which can cause goiter and also mental learning development disabilities. So we think it's a very important program, and it's been very successful so far in catching people who would normally fall through the cracks. Again, these aren't really expensive medicines and education programs to teach these kids, but unfortunately, around Pakistan, these kind of education programs have not been implemented enough. Pakistan is one of these countries that does have resources, but unfortunately, their level of health indicators are for some reason on par with some African nations who have much less resources than they do. One of the reasons is because of this India-Pakistan conflict, with so much resources by each country put for the last 60 years of conflict and 3 wars, with having 2 armies facing each other and all of the bullets and bombs and all of the training and all of the resources to have 2 armies be standing neck and neck to fight each other. Both countries have had a much less budget for healthcare and education. In fact, I think healthcare, Ethan, is it like 1 or 2%? I think it's 1% for healthcare. And it's just really, really low. And so that's why these things occur. It's sad because it doesn't have to be. It's almost like this conflict is eating from within the insides of both of this country and creating an even worse situation for people who are already poor. We do support schools in the local area by building floors or bathrooms or buildings, passing out supplies. This is my son Tim when he came with me to Pakistan, helping to pass out supplies. It was a great experience for him. I wish all kids his age could go to Pakistan and see what really goes on there and what is needed, and I think it would change a lot of attitudes and be a real wake-up call for some kids here to see just how lucky they are, and then use the gifts that they have to help others in this world who don't have the same fortunate education and healthcare available to them. Computers and science labs we give out to schools. Usually, because our budget is low, it happens when a donor comes forward and specifically wants to help a school, and we say, well, this school could use a couple computers, and this school could use a science lab or a building or a bathroom, and then they come forward and help us with that. We have community health fairs. You can see my son and I have learned some songs in Pakistani language, Urdu, and seeing a couple white guys play songs in Urdu in some of these remote villages, the kids, that's not something they see every day, so they tend to really enjoy it. Then we have at these health fairs, we have skits where the kids are involved, and they revolve around healthcare. So we have a fun day, and we have healthy snacks and things that we pass out, and all of the skits are related to healthcare. It may be as simple as one skit having two families. One family does all the things you're supposed to do, all the healthcare and hygiene practices that we teach, so that kids don't become patients, so that they avoid some of these things. And then one family doesn't do anything. And at the end, the family that doesn't do anything is moaning and crying on the floor and laying down, you know, and of course the kids laugh and it's funny, but they also get that message that could be us if we don't do those things that family that's looking smart and strong is doing. So we try to make it simple, but have a lot of impact. This is me with some of the young girls. The good thing about where I work in Azad Kashmir is that they don't threaten girls' schools. They actually, the community wants girls' schools. So it's not like in the areas near the border with Afghanistan where some of that is where the Taliban and some of these people who don't want girls to be educated threaten girls' schools. We've been lucky enough that nobody has ever threatened any of the schools that we are part of, and the people there definitely support girls' education. When the Marriott was blown up in September of 2008, even though my budget is too low to ever stay at the Marriott Hotel, we stay at much cheaper places, but I do meet with a lot of officials and other NGOs that we partnered with, and government officials and donors at that hotel. They have a lot of good meeting facilities, and so I got to know a lot of the guards. So when they blew up the hotel, a lot of the guards were on the front line. I think 17 were killed and many more were injured. And so we put forth an effort to raise funds, and we worked with the Hashu Foundation. The Hashwani family owns all those hotels, and they put together a long-term effort for education and scholarships for the kids of those who died and the families of those who were injured. And we gave out emergency cash assistance, so we worked together on that, and that was a very sad thing, but we were glad to be able to help. We've done coastal Sindh medical camps down in Karachi during the monsoon season. There was a lot of medical need, and some of these villages don't have anything as far as medical care. In our area, we have a special patients program where people that lost limbs or were injured and need constant aftercare, people who need physical therapy, or just people who need assistance because they were the breadwinner and by losing a limb they can't work anymore. This is Dr. Salman Naqvi. He is he's pretty much the head of the effort by Pakistani Americans to support our organization. He's president of our board. And this is Dr. Aisha Abrar. She works at the healthcare center in Chakar with her staff of lady health workers and midwives, and that's our ultrasound machine. And they take care of all the babies being born. Now, the staff is paid partially by me and partly by UNFPA in a partnership. And UNFPA is by far one of the finest organizations I've worked with. I haven't always been impressed with some of the Pakistan UN setups because I see some wastage of funds and I see some things that I don't think are necessary towards true development and proper effective use of money and resources. I think some cases it's a little wasteful, but I've been very impressed with UNFPA. This is our conference room / dining hall and some of my staff. We eat together. It kind of makes us kind of a family. So we're kind of a big happy family there. This is my office. You can see we have plastic chairs and simple furniture, local things that keep our budget down again and keep us able to use our funds and resources for what we're there for, which is medicines and doctors and healthcare. This is one of the rooms that we have volunteers, and I sleep in a room similar to this. We don't even have any furniture. I just pretty much live out of my bag, and I'm there about 7 months out of the year. I kind of go back and forth about 3 trips a year and come to the States and talk different places and raise funds for a month or 2, and then go back for a couple months and then back and forth. This is a couple of my guys I was telling you about, the local guys that were just kids at the time of the earthquake, and now I would put them up against anybody that I've ever worked with in disaster relief. This guy here is Afzal. These are two cousins, Afzal Zubair. And Afzal is just a really bright, honest, decent young kid who came out of the rubble of the earthquake. And I call him my external hard drive, because I'm kind of a forgetful guy. I need to put my agenda, and I have to read it every morning, and I have to make sure that I remind myself of stuff by making notes. And he's constantly reminds me and keeps me informed of what my schedule and what I need to do. And he's got a photographic memory. He's operationally very, very common sense, and just a wonderful guy to have around. Zubair is not quite as bright a bulb as Afzal is, but he's honest to a fault. He takes care of our volunteers, and if we give him a task, he jumps right on it and gets it done. So I guess what I mean to say by that is each of these guys, I try to build on their strengths and strengthen their weaknesses. And these are fine example of two guys who are Muslim, very peaceful. They're not going to blow up any buildings in their future, I can guarantee you that. They are just really good kids who love humanity and want to serve humanity and have found their calling after this earthquake to help others. This is our Tamga Isar medal that we won from the President of Pakistan, the nation of Pakistan. And this is an award we received from the AJK government of Kashmir. But the real reward is when we go to a village and we see the smiles of children that are healthier because we're there. That's the real reward. Of course, these medals and things are certainly helpful when we're presenting to donors and showing them what we've accomplished and that kind of thing. But there's nothing like the feeling of seeing kids that are in better shape because of what you and your donors are able to provide. This is one of our eye camps where we have an ophthalmologist that comes and works with us. This is one of my employees stitching up a patient. This is some of the beautiful kids that we serve out in these areas. This is a facility that we're going to be moving into. It's being built by the Pakistan Navy. And the Pakistan Navy just ended up being in that particular area a donor to build a facility and are building it in our area. It's almost finished, actually. It's a little bit more finished than even in this picture. It should be ready to move into by the end of July, hopefully. And it will be great because it's going to be twice the space that we have now in our main facility. When the SWAT crisis happened, I don't know if a lot of you may remember last year, a district called SWAT where the Taliban had come in and taken over, and the government, the army went in to clear them out. There was a big, several battles for a few months period of time, and it displaced about 2.5 million people to 3 million people, depending on some estimates. They call it the largest displacement of people in South Asia since the partition of Pakistan and India in 1947. So we went there, we took half of our staff there and worked with Edie, who does ambulance services. A lot of people may know Abdul Sattar Edie. He's a very famous philanthropist in Pakistan. And NRSP, which is National Rural Support Program. We worked with them in a small hospital in Zaidabad, which is very close to SWAT, where all of the people were coming down, and that hospital was overrun with patients. So we worked there, and people were living in schools in that district. The population of Mardan district swelled up about double, from about 2.5 million to about 5 million, 5.5 million people. So all the people living in that area were also affected, and their resources and their schools and things were all taxed by this development of this humanitarian crisis. So our teams went around and various places and took our services to the people in camps and schools where they were living. This is me giving out some stuffed animals to kids and meeting some of the people that were there. At the bottom is a lady who had a baby and 4 other small children, and the Taliban made her, according to her, through an interpreter, the Taliban made her husband and her 16-year-old son stay and fight at gunpoint, forced them to stay, and then let the kids and the mother go. So she was crying, not knowing whether or not her husband and son were even alive at that point. This is me at one of the refugee camps. I was warned not to go there as an American, that Taliban were mixing in with some of the IDPs escaping the fighting to fight another day, and if they saw me, they might take a shot at me or something. But I said, well, that's what they do, that's what they do. I mean, I'm there to help people who need it. And part of the reason that the Taliban have gotten out of control, quite frankly, is because the United States leaders at the time that Afghanistan was invaded by the Soviet Union and occupied, we spent billions to help recruit fighters from all over the Islamic world, created super fighters, weaponized them, gave them resources, money, weapons, even helped use the drug trade, the heroin trade, to further the goals of getting the Soviets out of Afghanistan. And what my problem is with all this, and what I even told people at this camp, I'm not afraid to apologize for my country if it did a mistake. I love my country. I think that if you apologize for something you should apologize for, it doesn't show weakness. In fact, it's weakness to not apologize for something you should apologize for. So here I was meeting with these people who had been affected directly by a group of extremists who we helped become what they were and helped that area become a threat to the entire world because of our short-sightedness. My point is very simple. How is it that we could rebuild Germany and Japan after World War II with all the resources that we put forth, but we couldn't rebuild our friends after the Afghan war? After all, the USSR was humiliating, bankrupted, and this war was a big part of it. A couple years later, the Berlin Wall came down, and we weren't waving Pakistani flags, but it was the Pakistani ports, railways, army, land, almost every regard we used Pakistan as an ally to help fight back the Soviet Union, our big enemy. So we left that place when the war was over, and we didn't help rebuild enough schools. We didn't get foreign fighters debriefed and repatriated. We didn't get weapons out of there. We didn't clear the landmines. We didn't help rebuild schools. We didn't help give children and mothers who had been traumatized by years of war the help that they needed. And so how is it a shock to anyone that bad guys took over that place, and that lawless place, and devastated place, and tortured place, and made it into their haven? So it's become what I consider one of the huge and biggest strategic blunders that the United States has ever engaged in, by winning the war in Afghanistan, but then losing the people. At that time, we were loved in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. We were cheered. People would wave American flags. We had a Pakistanis and Afghanis have a very high opinion of us. And the reason that they don't today has a lot to do with our failure to not walk away from them when they needed us. But at any rate, getting back to being at this camp, I talked to the people about what their needs were. I talked to the people about what it is that their complaints, and told them I was there to help, and I was there to spread the message of what they needed. And I visited there a few times and made sure that whatever I promised, I delivered. Instead of treating me with hatred, guys in a beard, a long beard that somebody might think in America because of the media coverage they get, which is about 2% of the truth, 100% of the time about Pakistan. There's so much more about Pakistan than people don't know. There's 170 million people, and most of them, believe it or not, don't want anything to do with terrorism. It's a far cry from not supporting the policies of our government that have hurt the people and never really been anything that has benefited them, between supporting terrorism. There's a big difference between that. And the people that I met here, even after they knew I was an American and that I loved my country, they still treated me like a brother and treated me like a member of the family, embraced me, and let me hold their children as though I was a member of the family. This is a picture that I needed, and I visited there a few times and made sure that whatever I promised, I delivered. Instead of treating me with hatred, guys in a beard, a long beard that somebody might think in America because of the media coverage they get, which is about 2% of the truth, 100% of the time about Pakistan. There's so much more about Pakistan than people don't know. There's 170 million people, and most of them, believe it or not, don't want anything to do with terrorism. it's a far cry from not supporting the policies of our government that have hurt the people and never really been anything that has benefited them between supporting terrorism. There's a big difference between that. And the people that I met here, even after they knew I was an American and that I loved my country, they still treated me like a brother and treated me like a member of the family, embraced me, and let me hold their children as though I was a member of the family. This is a picture that I would like to challenge Fox News or CNN to put on their TVs. And let me talk about the good people in Pakistan that I know, and the people that have suffered, that aren't anti-American, and the 200 Pakistani Americans who came with me to Haiti when I worked in Haiti. At the same time as this guy, Faisal Shahzad, was planning to make his bomb or whatever in Times Square, which fortunately didn't go off. At that same time, I had just brought back a mission of 3 months that I started with 200 Pakistani American doctors. But nobody in the United States knows about that. Nobody at CNN did a story on them. So unfortunately, it's the bad news that we hear about. And it's these wonderful people who are Pakistani American who I've come to know by living in their homes, because they treat me like a brother because I'm helping their home country. I go into their homes, I meet their children, their families, I eat dinner with them, I sleep in their guest rooms, and I see their family from the inside. And some of the most wonderful people I've ever met. So part of what I'm doing now, I want to use my 4.5 years in Pakistan to also teach Americans about Pakistan and an America they don't know, because Pakistani Americans are a very successful and vibrant group of people that I've come to know, and I really would hate it if any of my fellow Americans treated them with any less than the dignity that they deserve, simply because they happen to have shared the same nation of birth with somebody like Shahzad Faisal. That's my presentation, and if you have any questions, I would love to take them. Thanks. Yes, sir?
Yeah, when was that earthquake in Pakistan, and where was that marriage that was blown up?
Well, the earthquake in Pakistan happened on October 8th of 2005, about 35, 40 days after Katrina, something like that. I arrived there on October 17th of 2005, about 8 days after the actual earthquake, because I had spent a week getting supplies together for this team of Pakistani American doctors. And what was the other?
The Marriott.
The Marriott was, I think it was late September of 2008. I don't know the exact date, but I'm pretty sure it was late September 2008.
Where?
I'm sorry, it was the Islamabad Marriott in Islamabad, Pakistan, the capital. Yes, sir.
Do you have any plans to help out with the new disaster that's being built up in Unzala right now? With the lake being built.
Yeah. We are in touch with General Farouk Ahmed Khan was the Federal Relief Commissioner at the time of the earthquake. He's somebody that I got to know very well from working on the earthquake with him. So basically, let's see, I think I might have some. That's okay. In Hunza Valley, the National Disaster Management Agency, which is now run by General Farouk, is taking care of that area right now. So I've actually emailed him, and I have, with the resources that I have at my disposal right now, I could send 2 medical teams and medical supplies if they needed them. And if the landslide and the lake collapse, then it's going to be a big mess, and he probably will call us forward. But right now, we're kind of on standby. He'll let us know if he needs us. But we are looking at that situation and hoping that that lake holds and doesn't collapse. It's a bad situation. guess there's no questions. I appreciate y'all coming.
Please join me in thanking Todd.
Oh, I'm sorry, you had a question, didn't you?
I will ask you after.
No, we'd rather hear.
I'll come up
Sure, okay. Yeah, I'm happy to meet anybody one-on-one and say hello and talk to you. And my website is shinehumanity.org, so you can check out that if you'd like, shinehumanity.org. I apologize for anyone who wants a card. I haven't had any time to print new cards, and when we were in Oakland, I gave my last card out and haven't made new ones. I gave out a lot more than I realized, so sorry I don't have any cards, but I'm happy to give you my contact info. Ethan?
This gentleman has a question, but I would like to, if there's time, I'll ask something.
Oh, I'd love for you to speak. In fact, Ethan has a couple great books, and I think he'll tell you about them. Anyone that wants an understanding of what is happening on the ground, some of the history, not only of Pakistan, but of India and Pakistan in that region, I would highly suggest both of Ethan's books, Alive and Well in Pakistan, and then his updated book about his last year's visit to Pakistan called Overtaken by Events, a Pakistan Road Trip. And who has the question?
Gentleman over here.
Oh, another question? Sure.
Are you a nonprofit registered here in the U.S.?
Yes, sir. We registered as a nonprofit. Our 501c3 status is still pending. However, we have an organization that is a 501c3 called Global Giving. And at our website, it links to our page at their website. Global Giving is a 501c3 in Washington, D.C. that is a 4-star rated charity, navigator charity, and GuideStar charity that we've worked with for the last 3 years. Whenever anybody wants a tax deduction, they can donate to us through them. And the great thing about them, besides the fact that they're 4-star rated, have the highest rating by different agencies that rate nonprofits and 501c3s, is that you can go there and look by country, by project. You can find if you're interested in women's empowerment, you can search by that, and you can literally find projects all over the world, not just Pakistan, but anywhere in the world, and it links donors in the States that can donate to this cause, get a tax deduction, and help some small organization that is vetted by and approved by Global Giving, and they're very rigorous with their standards. So it's good for us to be involved with them because of that. But literally, they can connect people and organizations doing great work in very far-flung and remote areas that normally wouldn't have access to U.S. donors. So it's a fantastic website. I would encourage anyone to check out globalgiving.org, not just about my organization, but in finding any effort that you might want to support.
So my question, Todd, was going to be to ask you to talk briefly about Haiti and the 6 weeks you spent there.
Sure, yeah, I was going to go to that set of photos. Where is Haiti? I'll just kind of fly through these real quickly if people want to see them. It's basically our mission in Haiti. You can see it's a very beautiful country. This is at the Dominican border. I went through the Dominican Republic the day after the earthquake because the gridlock at the airport in Port-au-Prince was, the airport was a really tough situation, and they didn't have any commercial flights anyway. So I joined up with a group of Haitian Americans who were taking it was basically the only amusement park in Haiti at the time, a children's amusement park, and we kind of took that area over with them and set up our hospital there, and they helped us with on-ground security and all the logistical needs that we had there. And this is in that park, some of our doctors from my organization and from Destiny World Outreach Missions, and we even had some Gig Harbor firefighters and paramedics that did a great job with us. Just see some of the children that we were helping and working with, some of our staff. This was our hosts on the ground, an organization from Haiti called AIMER Haiti. And this is one of our first teams in Dominican Republic that was coming across, and we had all of our supplies and things. And in that effort, like I said, we lasted there for about 3 months and did a lot of great work. This is the guy that I hooked up with, who is an ex-U.S. Army Haitian American, and his family was the group on ground that we worked with. So by partnering with an on-ground agency, they knew the lay of the land, they knew the country, they knew the language, they knew the culture. They were able to help us with so many things so that we could bring our doctors in and be effective and have a place to camp, a safe place to work, and start really helping people. These are some of the shanty towns you can see where people just set up under tarps and things. And we would go to these, we would base at the facility, but then we'd go out to the city. The U.S. Army 82nd Airborne would take us out with them, and we would go around and treat kids, give out food. This was a young lady with a broken leg that needed surgery. All sorts of things that we did there. This cute little girl with a broken leg. Some of the devastation there. I've never seen anything like downtown Port-au-Prince, the way it was beat up. This is, it gives you a perspective of this children's amusement park, which is now, you know, a healthcare facility. Did all kinds of surgeries there. We had USAID gave us some generators and an operation theater tent, and I'll show you. You can see back here, hundreds of people lined up to be treated every day. We were dealing with, a lot of what we did was we were dealing with some very serious emergencies and life-threatening things and bad infections, but we were also, because total systemic failure, everything from doctors' offices to hospitals were destroyed. So we were also treating the colds and the flus and the scabies and the mother-child prenatal care issues. So we were actually able to take the pressure off facilities that were more supplied and managed for ICU units and ventilators and things that we didn't have. So we were able to take the pressure off a lot of other facilities. This was our inside of our emergency room, emergency theater, operation theater. These tents that were given by Rotary Club and Shelter Box really helped us out a lot. These are the Shelter Box guys handing out food in City Soleil. Let's see. These are some of the Gig Harbor firefighters and medical staff that we have with us. Let me get through this. Let's see. This was with the U.S. Army. They would take us out, and this is by the Presidential Palace, where there was a lot of tent villages outside of there, and people that in neighborhoods nearby that the Army knew where they were at, and they didn't have any health care available, so we would set up shop in these places, and the Army would take us about. We really didn't need them for security, because honestly, during the day, there wasn't any, I never felt threatened or saw anything that happened. At night, there were some things that would happen, but the Army mostly was helpful at that point with pointing us in the direction of places that, little enclaves and little neighborhoods that hadn't gotten a lot of medical help. So they were really helpful with that, with the intel part of things. And of course, if anything had happened, it was certainly having them there, they would have been able to secure us, but there wasn't really any need for that. And that's, you know, just a real quick little thing on that. Ethan, I'd like to have you up and just talk a little bit about your books and
I'd be happy to, but I think why don't we just talk informally with whoever you'd like to say after this is
Okay. Well, he's got 2 great books, so anybody who wants to talk to Ethan about how to get them, or his website, which is aliveandwellinpakistan.com. And again, I really appreciate y'all coming. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me. And if anybody wants to help our organization, we do take volunteers that are qualified in medical or logistical or education. Anybody that wants to come, if there's something they can do to help our area, we'd love to have you. We have had hundreds of volunteers in the last 4.5 years, never even a missed flight or an injury or any problem. So we're very good at taking care of our volunteers. If somebody out there wants to volunteer with us here by helping with social networking and helping set up events around the States, we'd love to do that too. There's also a really exciting music project that we're doing with some famous Pakistani singers and musicians and American singers and musicians, and it's an effort to bring musical artists together from Pakistan and America, write together, use some of the poetry of Iqbal, some of the poetry and lyrics of John Coltrane, for instance, do some music together, record the whole thing, record an album, film a documentary with all of the creative meetings and times where we're just sitting there with the guitar, writing stuff, and film everything and make something out of it that will be a documentary and music project that we can then show to Americans and Pakistanis. And my big interest is to show young people, particularly young people in America, and get their attention, because some of the music stars that will be involved in it, get their attention with the music and also show them something about Pakistan other than the bad news, something on a human level and cultural level. I find that getting to people's hearts, one way is with food, but I'm not a cook. In fact, if I cook something, usually people will go running the other direction. But with music, you can also get into people's hearts and then open up some information to them that they haven't seen in the major media. And then hopefully that would erase some misconceptions and bring Pakistani and American people closer together. Then we want to make it a series where we do the same thing with other countries. So hopefully it'll work out nicely. If you want to know more about that, I'm certainly available for that as well. And I would just, on the last note, would encourage anyone, whether they work with my organization or whether it's some other organization, whether it's on the other side of the world or down the street, there's always people that need help, and it's very gratifying. I found it to be the most gratifying thing that I've ever done in my life besides raising my son. And I hope that even if you don't work with my organization, that something I said inspired you to go out into the world and keep doing what you're doing to help others, or start a new project, or tell your friends and your sisters and brothers or whoever that you know about what we're doing, or start your own thing and make it happen. Thank you.